Good evening and welcome to BBC News at 6. Tony Benn, the leading voice of the radical left in British politics for more than 50 years, has died. He was 88. There were tributes from across the political spectrum today. The Labour leader Ed Miliband called him a champion of the powerless. Tony Benn's family said simply, "We are comforted by the memory of his long, full and inspiring life." Our political editor Nick Robinson looks back on his career.
We will not accept the cuts that they are trying to make.
No protest, no demo, no march was quite complete without Tony Benn. The man who a headline once proclaimed to be the most dangerous man in Britain, a sentiment Labour leaders sometimes shared, joked that age had transformed him into a national treasure.
The thing about Tony Benn is you always knew what he stood for and who he stood up for. And I think that's why he was admired right across the political spectrum. There are people who agreed with him and disagreed with him, including in my own party. But I think people admired that sense of conviction and integrity that shone through from Tony Benn.
Politics, Benn always insisted, was about issues, not personalities. Easy to say if you're one of the biggest political personalities of the modern age.
I disagreed with most of what he said, but he was always engaging and interesting, and you were never bored when reading or listening to him. And the country has lost a great campaigner, a great writer, and someone who I'm sure whose words will be followed keenly for many, many years to come. So a sad day for British politics.
Anthony Wedgwood Benn was born into the establishment.
Good evening.
The modern face of the Labour Party in the 1960s was the son of a Viscount who had to fight in the courts to renounce his title so he could run for election and become plain Tony Benn MP.
You have defeated the courts. You have changed the constitution of this country by your own power.
Benn wasn't always a radical. As a minister in the 1970s, he unveiled Concorde as a symbol of the new high-tech Britain Labour promised to create.
I now call Tony Benn to reply on behalf...
But he concluded that he and his party had failed to change society because of all the policies which he claimed Labour's leadership had simply refused to implement.
Reflation of public sector service spending, ruled out. Substantial cut in arms expenditure, ruled out. The immediate introduction of a wealth tax, ruled out. The imposition of selective import controls, ruled out.
Anti-Europe, anti-NATO, pro-nationalising leading industries. Many of his colleagues despaired. Benn won the argument, but failed just in a bid to become Labour's deputy leader.
Tony Benn, 49.574. Dennis Healey, 50.426.
The party would soon split. The left had won, but some on the right walked out to form a new party. Michael Foot led Labour to its worst ever election defeat on a manifesto mocked as the longest suicide note in history. The left blamed the splitters, the right blamed Benn.
Michael Foot put it well when he said he was a prophet of the Old Testament. It's a good phrase, because he was sort of prophetic in the way he spoke. He was seeing the great vision, but the great vision belonged to the past, essentially. Funnily enough, for such a modern-minded man, technically, he was actually quite old-fashioned politically. He longed for a society that had gone.
The tide of ideas was not with him, but in Parliament he continued the fight.
The Humphrey Applebys of every country in Europe have got together and they say, you can't do this, Minister, because we've agreed with the Dutch that if they do this, the Belgians won't object to what the Italians have said to the people from Luxembourg. So the Minister has got no power. Anyway.
You're not going into the House of Lords.
The man who'd fought to get into the Commons left it in 2001, quipping that it would allow him to spend more time on politics.
Anybody here from New Labour, your money will be refunded if you leave quietly.
And through all this, he kept a diary, an unmatched chronicle of post-war British politics and Bennite philosophy.
The real division in society is between the people who create the wealth by working and those who own the wealth, and those who own the wealth have far too much power and they use it to control those who create the wealth.
After the last of 8 volumes was published, he spoke about life and death.
At my age, you do ask yourself how long you've got and what will it be like when you die. And my wife said that she thought death was a great adventure. And she was dying of cancer for 5 years, and her courage when she knew her time was up was very great. It impressed me very much. And so I learned from her how to die, and I have thought a lot about it. But I'm not afraid of dying at all.